Here we are again with our friend Arracourt in the Battalion Combat Series. I am going to be tackling either the full campaign or the first 5 days of the full campaign. Either way, the setup is the same, as you can see here, and the victory conditions are the same. So it will just really depend on how I feel at the end of turn 5, whether I want to keep going or whether I want to call it there. But this is September 18th, 1944. September 18th, 1944. And we are going to be playing more BCS. This time I promise to do it as correctly as possible. But I do appreciate everyone's rules updates for me from the last learning scenario that I did. I did make some key mistakes around the town of Loonville. That terrain I misidentified, and also I did some attacks with units that couldn't have done those types of attacks. So all part of the learning process. It's okay. We're going to be a little bit better about it this time. With the game beginning in this state, let's talk about what I'm going to be sort of using from a rules perspective and then some of what we're looking at here. First of all, I am going to be doing the chip pull system again, where you draw 3 and pick one formation from the side that got the majority out of that. I know that the BCS diehards don't like the chip pull system, but because I'm playing solo and because I like sort of a more tactical focus when I'm talking about a big, huge campaign like this, solo playing both sides, it's going to be a lot more fun for me to play it and consequently more enticing to me to do videos on this. So I realize that there's a whole strategy in BCS about which formation you activate first and the order that you sequence things, but I'm going to go with a little bit less control over that just so that I can maintain my enjoyment of it. And then we're going to be using the soft jumps rule. So if you watch my learning scenario, when you displace basically an HQ or a combat train, they move in a particular way, they retreat in a particular way. The soft jump rule, all it means is that the location of a particular HQ, let's find one. The location of a particular HQ is not actually known until they get jumped, and then you either find out if that HQ was actually in that location or actually somewhere else. Sort of a fog of war intelligence thing for what's going on the map. Also helps me play solo, and I like to call it Schrodinger's HQ rule, because you don't know if the cat's in the box till you open the box. All right, so let's talk about where we are. We can see I've got the initial reinforcements for the scenario going there. I believe the Germans are going first, so we'll let them take the first activation. But there aren't a lot of German formations on the map. In fact, it's going to start, that cup is going to start with 4 U.S. formations and 1 German formation. If you watch the Loonville video, a lot of this is very similar to how we set up that particular scenario. The only difference here being that CCA 4 started the scenario here. They're going to start a little bit further west. But in general, same setup. We've got the second cav screening up there. We're going to try and use those more effectively this turn, or this time, I should say. We've got CCR 4 down here coming up this road. And then off over here, we've got the CCB4, which we didn't have in the other scenario. Now they start used already, so they're only going to have 1 activation, and they do start a little fatigued, but they're going to be over here in the west. We do have a German stationary unit here in Chateau Salin, which we're going to have to take out. Shouldn't be that difficult. But the Germans are going to have a lot of latitude with how they bring in their units. They do have 2 complete brigades that they're going to be able to bring in whenever they want on any turn during the reinforcement phase, and they don't have to bring them in together. Where they come in is fixed, but otherwise it's up to the Germans to decide how they want to defend this. Victory for the scenario, holding the majority of the victory locations. Loonville, you know about. We've also got Arracourt, the village here, victory point location, and Chateau Salin here. Holding, and then I think there's a 4th one, and that 4th one may be covered, or maybe it's only the 3. Let me double check. I thought there were 4, and if you controlled 3 of the 4, you would get victory points for them. You're also going to score victory points for eliminating your opponent's hard armor units, your yellow units. And yeah, so it's only the 3. So you're going to get a victory point for control of each of these 3. 1, 2, 3 there at the end of the game. You're also going to get points for eliminated hard yellow units. And that's basically it. So very clean, very simple. We're going to obviously want to rebuild those yellow hard units as they take losses. And really, it's going to be a battle over these 3 points. Now, how do we want to approach this? As someone who is coming to this scenario new, doesn't really know a lot about the history, we're looking at a wide swath of operating area for the Americans. In fact, we've even got a tank battalion up there with some screening units. So really, the Germans are kind of in this sort of pocket here, and they're going to be hit from kind of multiple different angles. So it'll be interesting to see how we try and fight off the U.S. and maybe try and mount our own counterattack. This seems to be the easiest one to take for the Germans. Outside of, their position, right? Not a lot of defenders. There's fairly open ground to get there. Obviously not very defensible. Luneville, more defensible, but a little bit tougher to take. So we'll see how that goes. I think we might develop a strategy as we go, as I start to see the reinforcements I'm getting, as we start to see some of the opening moves, and then we'll make some decisions on the fly. I'm not really certain sort of from a planning perspective, what the Germans can hope to accomplish. I mean, these screen units up here are all American units as well. So we've got like this narrow salient here that the Germans are going to have to figure out. And then I also have this German unit over here, and I'm not sure where he goes. I'm going to have to look at the setup. It is a good unit. 21st Panzer. I'll look at where he goes. But anyways, let's get started. Let's do some BCS. I will check in somewhat infrequently to begin, to just show you how the game is developing, and then as we get some really critical moments, we'll come back and look at what's going on and some of the decisions that I've been making. This unit starts in the dead pile. That's what I just discovered and remembered why I put him there. So this is going to be our dead pile side. First turn of BCS Arracourt, September 18th, done. Not a lot of action. The weather was rain. That precluded a lot of long-distance firing. Not a lot of units on the board as well to start the scenario. This particular command here of the 4th CCB, they actually were finished for the first turn, so they didn't get a chance to make the assault on this immobile unit here. Germans want to try and put some pressure on this flank, because as you can see, their only formation essentially was this one here. Kind of in this salient. They had another one come on. This is 21st Panzer Division, come on over in this direction. Obviously, controlling this road all the way up to Luneville, very important. And we saw what happened in this sort of flank of the battlefield in the last video that I did, where I just did the Luneville scenario. So I kind of understand what's possible to happen here. And I want to make some adjustments, and I'll explain how I did that. But, the German 15th Panzer Group, they did not actually do much. They went into prepared defense. They're holding this center area, which is a very power position for this map, because of the victory point locations being here, here, and here. And they want to just hold this center, prevent the Americans from linking up together. The Americans obviously want to prevent that from happening. The CCA from the 4th Division put some artillery fire down here on this Luftwaffe unit along this river crossing. And they also moved up to block that crossing to prevent 15th Panzer from having options, funneling them into the strong point here that the Americans have set up. There's a 2-step or 1-step loss on this Luftwaffe unit after a bombardment rolls were made. The Germans for turn 2 did not get any replacements, so they're stuck with what they've got. Pretty good prepared defense position here. I think if any of the American formations are going to sort of try and push them off of that, it's going to be CCA4. The problem is they have to watch out for German reinforcements. The Germans have decided to bring in 11th Panzer up here. Like I said, they want to sort of support this flank, and they also want to put CCA4 in sort of an awkward position, right? This highway here is going to allow a lot of rapid movement by these German panzers to come down this direction, back up this unit here, contest this victory point. CCB4 is not a numerous formation. They've only got these 2 units, and the rest of CCA down here are holding kind of the flank around here. So it's going to be interesting to see who goes first here, because if the Germans can come down this highway, they can actually split this this brigade into some component parts, and that would not be good for the Americans. And so we'll see what the chit draw has for us there. But otherwise, the Germans swiftly trying to take Luneville to lock it down. The Americans are going to contest that. We can see a lot of reinforcements coming in for the Americans here. Over here, we've got 79th Armored Division, or 79th Infantry Division. They're going to have lots of infantry. That's going to mean a lot of ability to hold ground. They want to disrupt 21st Panzer's advance along this part of the battlefield. And so, for that matter, does the 106 Cav group, who are going to come up from this direction. We're basically just going to want to try and pincer these guys, or at least shove them off so that they can't threaten the eastern side of the town here. Now, when it comes to what I learned from the last time I played, we've obviously got CCR4, and we've got 2nd Cav in here. Now, you can see now that they're mingled in, right? That's bad. That's bad for their activation rolls. We want to get this cleaned up. But I did feel like I needed, my mistake when I played the Luneville scenario was not getting CCR4 into a defensive position around the town of Luneville and to build out a defense in depth around it so that the Germans couldn't counterattack it effectively. We have more tools to do that, obviously, with these reinforcements coming in on this turn. But I do need to get 2nd Cav pushed a little bit more forward. We saw what happened to 2nd Cav in that last video. They got surrounded and got completely blown away. And, a lot of just one-step recon units. So we want to get these recon units into a better position. We want to get the headquarters for 2nd Cav into a different spot. And we basically just want to throw interference in the way of any more German forces coming down here. The Germans, at some point in the game, can bring in 113th Panzer, and they can come in along anywhere in this top edge of the map. And so we want to force 113th Panzer into coming in at a spot that is not going to be beneficial for the Germans. I could have brought them as the Germans in this turn, but I want to see, it may be a mistake, but I want to see what the Americans do and how they set up their defense so I can counterattack at the spot they're weakest. And I feel like committing all of my reinforcements up front on turn 2 does not bode well for a long-term strategy for the Germans. So we're going to see how this goes. Now, we did get rain again for the 2nd turn, so I suspect it may be a quieter turn, but we do have a lot more chits in the cup now because of all the formations in play. So it's going to take a bit longer to play through the turn. So we'll see how it goes. But yeah, we're on our way now. This feels like the entire toolbox is at my disposal. We've got so many more options about what we're going to do, how we're going to try and accomplish it, and I'm excited to dig in. Okay, we have reached the end of turn 2 in BCS Arracourt. A lot happening on this turn. As you can see, the U.S. Enjoying a substantial numerical advantage. Beginning to think not bringing in 113th Panzer for the Germans that turn may have been a mistake. Here's the activation order from the chit pull. As you can see, the Americans were getting basically 2 activations per German activation. Definitely a lack of formations for the Germans, and it's not going to get better this turn, but next turn they're going to get some reinforcements. I do think I need to bring on 113th Panzer. They're allowed to come in basically all across the top of the map. I think they can come in over here as well. Activity in turn 2. So we had a full day's maneuver. Unfortunately, the U.S. suffered from a bunch of really bad activation rolls and just couldn't get anything going. CCB of the 4th Armored was going to try and take this position this turn, and they unfortunately could not do it. This was 111th Panzer, successfully managed to bring down some reinforcements here, this Pioneer unit from way up to the top of the map, and then get them flipped over and ready for combat here. So this is going to be tough to crack Chateau Salin with that unit there, and obviously with CCB4 just dithering, not able to do it. CCA of the 4th Armored, they sort of, so it was interesting because 111th Panzer stormed onto the map from this direction. We had some conflict here. We did try and do some engagements against 111th Panzer, but they got into a really good position. So CCA4, the blue formation here, they took it on the chin. This screen unit was out here and got pushed back by some German armor right here. More German armor moving in from this position. In general, pushing CCA4 up against this river line here where we've got 15th Panzer who went into prepared defense last turn, holding the line. And so we've got basically a snake eating its tail here, because on this side of the map, we've got the Germans with all the initiative and all of the very effective fire and attacking going on, and the Allies, the Americans, trying to hold pat. Over here, it's the opposite. We've got 15th Panzer trying to hold in their prepared defense, and this is going to be real tough. And the reason it's going to be real tough to do anything to them is because of this single support unit, these Jagdpanzers here. A 4 value armor rating is insane. They're adding that then to the 4 effectiveness rating, efficiency rating of all of these infantry units that are in 15th Panzer. And it's just really hard. The Americans don't quite have the numbers or the positions yet to assault some of these positions, which are now in prepared defense, especially across some, like, these rivers. They're just, like, they're holding, like, a really nice salient right in here, and it's going to be very difficult to dislodge them with 111th coming down, putting pressure here. But we're trying to make the moves. We're trying to go. We did get CCB from 6th Armored into the game. They unfortunately failed their activation, so they're still stuck down here along this road. We've got 106 Cav Group who came up here. They basically interrupted 21st Panzer's sort of end around. So 21st Panzer was I think the first, no, it was the second German unit to activate. They were trying to come down here and swing through and hit Luneville. Unfortunately, 106 Cav was able to come up here, start screening these units, really giving them nowhere to go. A lot of tough tough enemy ground to break through here. This independent unit is a tank destroyer. It's a lightly armored unit, but look at that. It's got a 3 hex range. Couldn't use it this turn. It was very rainy, only 2 hex, but that's going to be something that the Germans are going to have to break through in order to hit some of these light tank units from 2nd Cav. But yeah, 21st Panzer stymied. Oh, this objective marker should no longer be there. We did some artillery barraging. Did we do a hit? Yeah, we did do a hit. And then, yeah, so 79th Infantry Division, they're moving in very slowly from the east. They were going to try and contest this river line from 21st Panzer, basically prevent them from making a run towards Luneville. But if they did, then suddenly 79th Infantry is in their rear. And they've really got to watch out. I think they may have overextended themselves here. We're trying to protect these roads, but we do have some screen units that can leave screen up here whenever they want, and they've got a ton of movement points, so they can come around here and maybe try and threaten the combat train of this particular formation. So it's really interesting. A lot of maneuver, counter maneuver happening. Not a ton of attacking so far. A lot of the formations are trying to get set up into a position where they can really bring the hammer down, and it's proving elusive. Someone told me online that you have to really go after the HQs and the combat trains, and I have been trying to do that. The Germans actually, from 15th, they did make an attack with these Pioneers on the 2nd Cav HQ. They did manage to jump it. That should be flipped over. Let's fix that. And jump it back a little bit. It was a soft jump, so basically what that means is when you make the attack and they're forced to retreat an HQ, was the HQ actually there, or was it sort of like old intel from their previous location? So actually 2nd Cav HQ was here. And we forced this recon unit to retreat. You know, a lot of these units are really weak, one step, just trying to get some artillery bombardments in here. The activations have not been going the way of the Americans, and we've got a bunch of formations now with Fatigue 3, Fatigue 3. There might be another one somewhere. No. Yeah, so these 2 Fatigue 3 formations, they're going to have a choice this upcoming turn about whether they stop to recover or whether they press on to get, and once they hit Fatigue 4, they'll have to stop. But Fatigue 3 is really hard to overcome on the activation roll, so I may take the recovery period for them. That's going to give the Germans a little bit of breathing room, especially if I bring on 113th Panzer over here, which I'm about to do. And yeah, so we're in for September 20th here in BCS Arracourt. Let's go. We just finished up the September 20th turn. Kind of uneventful for the Americans, but the Germans definitely got the better of it. I'll take you left to right across the map. Really the only place where the Americans made progress. They ended up finally taking Chateau Salin over here, displacing the German units in there, causing some casualties. Germans took a lot of casualties, even though they did get into a better position. They did take a lot of losses, so that's going to be a victory point for the Allies, and they're going to, CCB4 is going to spend quite some time getting this all reinforced, strengthened, defensive position, maybe some prep defense. They've done their job. CCA4, they're the blue formation here. They came under furious attack by the 111th Panzer, who came down here, ended up destroying a unit. I think the only casualty that the Germans caused from unit destruction perspective was this really good U.S. tank battalion, or is this a company? Tank company. And it was 111th Panzer who did it, and they did it without taking fatigue, which was equally impressive. They have secured kind of this slice of the map here. They've blocked this crossing here, and they've really put CCA4's combat train under threat. There's really an unobstructed view to there, and if they jump that, it's going to put all the combat operations the Americans have going on up here in jeopardy. They've actually found themselves pretty far extended, and what didn't help matters with CCA4 is that they failed their activation this turn, so they haven't really done anything. Or they didn't fail it, actually. They were at Fatigue 3, and so they chose to take failed activation for the whole turn to reduce that fatigue. But now they're really sort of overstretched and in a really delicate position, because on top of that, the Germans also brought in 113th Panzer this turn as reinforcements. They're coming down this road, wanted to free up 111th to move this direction, and really put a lot of pressure on the Americans, squeeze them between these formations, which they're doing pretty effectively. 15th Panzer Group here, this division, they did lose a unit that was kind of caught out to dry. You'll remember from last turn, he was up here. 2nd Cav managed to regroup, and those new tank destroyers that they got assigned to them made short work. That with some artillery made short work of them. And so this little snake sort of thing continues in here. The Americans down here, we had a bunch of, so we had CCB 6th. They managed to move up the road a little bit, but they only got half a partial activation, so they couldn't do much. They're trying to get up in this direction to kind of stabilize this part of the line. This road's super important in terms of the Allies being able to move back and forth quickly, and they would really like to eliminate this Luftwaffe battalion here if they can, or at least cut them off. Not a lot of action around Luneville. 106th Cav They basically took a retreat out of a combat here. 21st Panzer they did manage to get some activations and move down here with some infantry. They want to kind of block 106 Cav from cutting them off from the approach to Luneville, and it was not helped by 79th Infantry failing their activation, so they couldn't move, they couldn't do much this turn. These tank destroyers didn't get a chance to move. That gave some initiative here to 21st Panzer. There was some skirmishing back and forth. You can see 2nd Cav is trying to block off these river crossings and force them into this little pocket here. Not a ton of activity, but we did take some losses. The Americans got replacements, the Germans did not, and we're going to move on to the 21st, and we'll see how that goes with weather and so forth. End of September 21st, and the Germans are really taking a beating. It is not pretty. They they got pushed around all over the map. They had some significant unit losses, which rebuilds are pretty easy in this game, but some dead infantry pioneer units from multiple formations. The Americans have suffered some losses as well. More importantly, these yellow units are worth victory points, I believe. So we're definitely going to want to rebuild those. But the U.S. is getting replacements at a far steadier rate. The Germans have rolled 1 twice, 2 turns in a row on replacements, and so it's become a battle of attrition. They've got a lot of beat-up units on the map, and they're losing the manpower war. Now, that might change with some reinforcements coming in, but I do know that the U.S., the Allies, are getting the Free French coming in this turn. And they're already sitting pretty. So they've got control of Chateau Salin. They have got control here of Luneville, I believe. No, that's not Luneville. This is Arracourt. And they've got control of Luneville as well. And there's really not an immediate threat to any of those positions. Maybe this one, where 4th Armored is holding the town. But 4th Armored has pretty successfully blunted the attack coming from 113th Panzer. They did take some losses, but in general, forcing 113th Panzer to kind of go around. Controlling the roads in this system is really important. Provides a lot of mobility, and supply traces have to go along those roads. And so there's a lot of real interesting positioning and thinking you have to do when it comes to where do you put your units defensively. We're so used to games that have just kind of units in every hex as like a large front, but we're at the battalion scale here, and you can see that really it's about holding key positions. This crossroads here is an important one. That's why the U.S. are parked there. And it really kind of stalled out the German momentum. They just can't get an operational tempo going that is threatening really at all to the U.S. 111th Panzer did have some limited success this turn. They managed to push back a few of the units that were kind of overstretched from 4th Armored. And they're in pretty good shape. The fatigue levels are low on these German formations. But really, they want to be focusing their efforts here for that victory point, try and hold that. And they just don't have a ton of units to do it. There's a really good sort of defensive perimeter being put up by the Americans, sort of in this western flank of operations. 15th Panzer Group, they took it on the chin a little bit. We've got more step losses. The one thing they did do is they made an artillery barrage here that eliminated an American light tank unit. And so that was a pretty good one. But they're still just in prepared defense, trying to hold this position until they can get some reinforcements. The 2nd Cavalry has successfully cleared out sort of the outskirts, the forested outskirts of Luneville. All of these armored cab units in screen. They're going to slow down whatever approach may show up. They got this tank destroyer battalion here that did manage to push back some German infantry, really now threatening the HQ, although in a position to threaten, not really threatening them. This formation is still pretty strong. But they got some support from 4th Armored, the CCR, 4th Armored, Combat Command R. So who moved up with some powerful tank units. So really just trying to collapse this defense and make it kind of meaningless in terms of victory conditions. Now, the Luftwaffe, 15th Panzer Group did manage to get some Luftwaffe units down in here. Down in here, and cut this road with this bicycle battalion. But as you're looking at this, they're tracing essentially their safe path up through this direction now that there's some tanks parked here. It's going to be awful tough for the Germans to dislodge that unless they attack with some infantry. It's going to be costly. And then over here on the right, the 79th Infantry Division is gearing up for a major assault across the river. They did actually clear out this particular crossing. What is this? Is it Geberville? something like that. They cleared out this crossing. They're going to be able to, as leg units, move across the river again here, and that's going to put the 21st Panzer HQ in a really difficult position. These forces are going to have to try and push these guys back. The combat train over here is very vulnerable right now, and it actually can't trace to the HQ as it stands, so they're going to have real problems when they go to activate. And 79th Infantry has a ton of armored support, and they've got these tank destroyers as well. 2nd Cav also wiped out one of their units that was gearing up for an attack on 106th. So it's just really not going the way the Germans want, and if we were playing the 5-game scenario, I'd bet heavily that the U.S. Would win this one at the end of this upcoming turn. Don't know if I'm going to stop there yet. We'll play through it and see where we're at, but so far the U.S. has had all of the momentum and are scoring most of the victory points. One thing I did forget to mention was that CCB of 6th Armored, who you remember was up in here. At the start of the 21st turn, you have to roll a die to see if they're withdrawn. Unfortunately, they did roll a withdrawal. It hadn't seemed to matter too much for the Americans, but there is a chance they can come back towards the end of the scenario with another die roll. We'll see what happens. Well, as luck would have it, the first activation of this turn, 21st Panzer, who is this light green German formation, did manage to activate first from the chip pull, which is pretty crazy. Unfortunately, it was a very painful activation. First of all, their main supply route was blocked, so that and then they rolled really poorly for their first activation. So that was a fail activation. That necessitated a voluntary HQ retreat and a retreat of a couple of units, which caused step losses. The HQ was able to get back to its supply source here, which is where actually the Free French are going to be coming on, and they're going to be attacking onto the map. So they needed to get some units there. And then they needed to try for a second activation after that first failure to see, I believe, if they could get a second activation out of their turn, and lo and behold, they did. They just barely got a partial activation out of it. They rolled really high, so despite the fatigue and the coordination and all of that stuff, they were able to bring their combat trains back on the map where the HQ was, although they're ghosted. Yep. And then they were able to get some units movements. They tried to dislodge these 2 infantry battalions here, and just were not able to. They tried an attack with these infantry. They tried to do some combats with this recon unit, and they just would not budge. They even did an artillery barrage, and it didn't cause any losses, or an attack by fire, which is the same as an artillery barrage. And so now they're in like a really tough spot. They did manage to get a safe path for these units, so assuming nothing changes, they will be able to. They won't take any penalties for that, but the Free French are going to come on. They get some bonuses for attacking across the map. I'm not sure if this river is going to affect them. Let's see here. Nope, that river takes a right turn right before you get to the town. Yeah, so it's going to be a pretty painful turn for 21st Panzer. They are not in a good spot, and this is unfortunate because it's one of the Germans' best formations, and they are just kind of being pinched between some very savage Allied bombardment and maneuver. This series, and probably this game specifically as well, very much like a fencing match. Thrust, counter thrusts, retreat in defense, counterattack. Like there's a lot of back and forth going on, and it's really interesting to see how you can use the tools to sort of undo a bad situation. Speaking of bad situations, 21st Panzer, they absolutely got hammered by both the French division that came on. Was that Dio? 2nd Division of Dio. Not sure what the actual unit designation is. These guys down here. They came on from this direction and, as you know, scattered the HQ and combat trains. That left the rest of their units scrambling to try and retreat in some fashion. And then 79th Infantry on the final activation of the turn came up and really put the screws to some of their depleted infantry here. They've cut off, did an artillery barrage and did a step loss to this recon unit, and he's kind of cut off at this point. It's going to be real nasty attritionally for that formation if they go first or next turn or go before some of these other Allied units go, but it's not looking good. The Allies are in the process of locking down Luneville, the Luneville area. 79th Infantry continues their slow move up. It's a big formation, very powerful, but very slow. They've got a lot of artillery, but a lot of their units are just march infantry. Even on their move side, they move with foot movement capacity. We had a 4th Armored CCR. They took a relaxed turn, I'm going to call it, to recover fatigue. Nothing really happening around Luneville right now. It's pretty secure. We did get 15th Panzer Group coming down and launching some attacks, counterattacking essentially the tank destroyers that 2nd Cav is operating, and managed to push them back across the river. Did a step loss to them, I believe. 2 step losses to them. So they're pretty beat up. They're a limited armored unit. That's what the green number means. So they have less capability. And then follow that up with an attack across the river. So 15th Panzer Group kind of is like this sleeping giant. You know, they get poked at and then they poke back pretty hard. They're still holding this forest, although they haven't made as many any progress really, but they are still holding it. And they're able to punch back kind of in different situations. They did get some reinforcements this turn. More Luftwaffe units showed up, and we're just kind of trying to wait it out. They're probably not going to go next turn because they're at fatigue 3. But hopefully I do see some German reinforcements coming on the map, so hopefully they can support. I'm not sure where they come in. Haven't looked that far. And then 113th and 111th Panzer were extremely effective on this turn. They've really been making CCA of 4th Armored pay. They eliminated 2 more units from that formation this turn. 2 really good units, which are victory points. Lost this tank battalion, lost this tank battalion, and you can see 5 action ratings. Very good units, and they just hammered them. And that has left this formation with 4 casualties, 3 of which are victory point armored hard units. So 4th Armored really needs to use some of the replacements that hopefully the Allies will get this turn. To rebuild that, because right now their forces are not very powerful. They've got an okay independent infantry unit. They've got some engineers who are pretty terrible. And they've got this recon unit who is screening, but who has taken a loss. And then they're separated. They've got some tank destroyers and a mechanized battalion over here. But they're being pushed back. This dual advance by these German panzer brigades are forcing them backwards, and they have to protect their combat train. And sort of the position that they're in that's making it difficult is that this combat train has to be on this road, this white road. It cannot leave that white road, and so that really is tethering a lot of their operations. Their HQ is up here at Arracourt, but it's really tethering their operations to this region, and the Germans really want to take a stab and strike through there. They've managed to wipe out most of the forward sort of defenses here. And then they've got an infantry or a mechanized, was that mechanized? Yeah, mechanized battalion kind of caught out up here around these panzers. So it's not a great situation in the western side of the map. The Germans still do have the ability to kind of turn the tide. And then over here, we're gearing up for some major action against 4th Armored CCB, who has managed to get into a forward position. There was some skirmishing back and forth here between these tanks and these infantry units who are taking refuge in this forest. But we have some... some Stugs in support there. So, and there's not really an easy way to get to this HQ. I guess some foot units could march through the woods, but it's gonna be tough to get there. So it's really interesting what's unfolding over here. We thought the Allies had it pretty much locked down and secured, but these German reinforcements are really making it difficult. We are going to be heading into the September 23rd turn. I've decided to keep going. I'm having a lot of fun with this. I really do like the chip pull, playing solo. It makes it very tactically focused, very locally focused when you're taking a turn. And still a lot of opportunities for both sides to cause some havoc, cause some damage. Actual very good turn for the Germans there on September 23rd. They were extremely effective, especially over here against the Allies. CCA4 is getting severely pushed back. You can see that a lot of their advanced positions retreats have been caused. There have been step losses in here. The unit that was reconstituting in Arracourt has been destroyed again, thanks to elements of 111th Panzer coming across here and doing some range engagements. It was looking pretty dicey. It looked like that the HQ was going to get jumped this turn, and unfortunately, the only reason it wasn't was because this unit that sort of made this little flanking maneuver would have been out of command range in that activation. And the Americans unfortunately suffered, especially with this formation here. They got a failed activation result, which didn't allow them to do anything, which is unfortunate because, 111th Panzer has some semi-vulnerable infantry here. Not totally vulnerable, but, at least they could have tried to push them back. But the Germans are really consolidating their forces, especially this turn with 11th Panzer coming down this road. That's going to allow 111th Panzer to shift over this direction, maybe gain control of this open area here, threaten Chateau Salin from the left. 11th Panzer comes this way, and then obviously we have 113th Panzer coming down this direction. So there's a lot of options strategically, tactically for the Germans over here to take, or at least assault, put the press on these 2 victory hexes. The Allies don't have a ton of force right now, unfortunately, over here. And then over here, 79th Infantry is doing their job. The French, who have really good armored units, I must say, chewing up 21st Panzer. They forced the HQ and the combat train all the way back. They are going to attempt to finish off these units, but here's the casualty pile for, look at that. That's all 21st Panzer, German's largest formation by far. 2nd Cav and 106 Cav has gotten in position here with screens to just make sure that if there's going to be any movement towards Luneville, that it's going to be contested, or it's going to be slow, I should say, but it will be contested as well. So we're going into sort of the next turn, which is going to be the halfway point. That'll probably be the last turn for this video, and then I'll do a part 2 for the second half of the campaign. The one thing I do want to show you here is the giant stack of reinforcements that the Germans are about to get on this turn. The top is 11th Panzer, but then they've got, I think, 559 Grenadiers coming on, which is this purple formation. That is going to change the landscape of this quite a bit. The Germans are going to have some punching power in the second half of this game and reverse the progress that the Allies have made, so it's going to be really fun to play through that. I think everyone, this is going to be a fairly eventful turn. I think everyone, with the exception of 79th Infantry, has less than 3 fatigue. So 79th is going to have to choose whether they're going to forego an activation this round to reduce their fatigue by 2, or try and go with a -3 penalty on the roll. They don't really have much to do at this point, simply because they've kind of cleared out their sector. So I may just take the recovery with them and get them back into fighting shape for the second half, because they're going to be very potent defensively, I feel, as the Germans get their act together. September 24th done, and it was another great turn for the Germans. There's been a huge breakthrough over on this side of the map. Lots of German panzer brigades coming down these highways and absolutely smashing the Allied defenses. The 4th Armored, holding Chateau Salin over here, is in a real big trouble. They're surrounded both by the 559 Grenadier Division and by the 11th Panzer Division, who've rapidly encircled them and destroyed a bunch of their units. Here's some of the casualties. They got a recon battalion destroyed, and a tank, or this is a recon company actually, and a tank, the Conley Tank TF Task Force. So those are both dead. That's another VP for the Germans with that yellow unit. And they're in a real bad way. If they get their activation, they're going to really suffer. They're probably going to have to voluntarily retreat their HQ. That's going to have some knock-on effects to their isolation status. Yeah, it's real ugly. And then 11th Panzer, the rest of 11th Panzer has come down the road, and they have driven straight down here. They actually jumped 4th Armored CCA, jumped their combat train, and that forced their HQ to have to withdraw from here. Now there's a very, very long and tenuous supply line command radius. I think most of these guys are still in command, but it's very tenuous. Trying to hold Arracourt here. They've been pushed back by 113th Panzer. The Germans are just sweeping in this direction, trying to wipe the Allies off the map. Now, if there is any good news, that good news is coming in the form of reinforcements this turn. There's going to be the 35th Infantry Division is going to come up here along A, and so they're going to be able to take potentially 559 Grenadiers in the rear, or at least get in position to relieve this pressure a little bit. But it's not looking great. The Americans don't really have the ability to hold this section of the map. They actually may have to give up Arracourt and focus their efforts on the 2 outside victory conditions. They've actually started moving 106 Cav over, these 2 screening units. They came down from this direction. They're trying to redeploy 106 Cav to slow down, with screened recon units, slow down the German advance if they can. It's unfortunate that the 79th Infantry Division, all of the American force over here, is so concentrated and so slow, because they would love to get into the battle in some fashion. But that's where we are in Arracourt here, about halfway through the campaign. I'm going to bring this video to a close. You can see the where we've ended up. It was tough sledding for the Germans early, and then they've come back with a vengeance. Reinforcements have made all the difference. The Americans still have some punch in them. We'll see how that goes. The second half of this video series should be pretty fun. Looking forward, there is a chance that CCB from 6th Armored returns to the game as well. They didn't see really any action, and they've got some significant forces that can make a difference. Hoping that die roll goes well for the U.S. But otherwise, hope you're enjoying this look at BCS Arracourt. I'm not really going into too much detail in the gameplay, just kind of showing you how it's evolving, and I hope that's okay. But if you want to see something different, if you want to see me run a formation operation potentially, I just don't want the video to get too bogged down, because we're talking about a pretty long campaign here in terms of gameplay. But I'm open to your thoughts and suggestions. Thanks for watching.